So Alice, Rosie, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So I think you're the first sort of sibling pairing that we've had on the show. Rosie, Alice, what was it like growing up together?
We were very close growing up, actually. We're quite close in age, and we just have happy memories of childhood, don't we, Rosie, really? Growing up, we're farmers' daughters. We were outside a lot. We were just very, very simple, good fun, making dens. We were always around sort of horses. Our mum's very horsey. So we just had we look back on childhood very fondly.
Interesting that you're farmers' daughters, because you named the brand, didn't you, Hicks and Brown, which is obviously what we'll get onto shortly, but you named it after your family farm, Hicks Farm. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. I think we really struggled when naming the brand because our names don't really lend themselves that well to a kind of brand name, and but we really wanted that kind of tie to some sort of family, that sort of thing. So so our dad's farm is Hicks Farm, so that's that's where the Hicks came from. So.
And it was a working farm, I'm assuming, when you guys were growing up. Did you have brothers and sisters? You obviously had sisters. Did you have any brothers, I suppose, that may have gone on to run the farm, or was it very much something that no one did, and you've kind of just got it as a family home now?
We have got, so our dad actually works farms with our uncle who has a son, so he's sort of come through into the farm. But I think kind of from an early age, we were sort of always around the farming side of things. And actually I guess when I was 16, actually, we're both quite independent. And I really wanted to get on the road as quick as I could. So I took my tractor test when I was 16.
Okay.
I did it in our village shop car park, which it seems really crazy. You're 16, you're not allowed to drive on the road before the day of your test.
Right.
So I took my dad out on the day of my test. We went for a drive and he said, right, we just need a practice before your test. And we met, it was quite a busy day on our little country roads, but I never had to reverse for anybody. They see a 16-year-old girl driving a tractor and you've never seen anyone going to reverse quite so quickly. So from then, I got my tractor test. So then I actually spent quite a few summers working on the farm, kind of getting some cash together to, be as independent as we could, really. So so we've both done our fair share on the farm growing up.
But it wasn't something you wanted to continue. Alice, can you drive a tractor, or is that something you can't?
No, I absolutely cannot drive a tractor. I went down the route of actually sort of waitressing in the local pub, because I certainly couldn't be trusted on a tractor. So yeah, I went down that route, working all hours in a pub, and again, just to get some independence. I think I did pass my tests 2 months after being 17. Was just desperate to get on the road and have some independence. But I probably had a few summers where I spent onion grading. Standing on the grader in the farmyard, which is not a pleasant task. Pretty smelly, dusty. Something I probably wouldn't want to repeat, to be honest.
And it's interesting because we've interviewed a few people that have worked or grown up on farms, from tame and wild through to, Chase Gin, for instance, with William Chase. And we always get back to that work ethic of kind of when you grow up on a farm, you do kind of muck in from a young age and kind of almost get that ability to kind of work all hours of the day, I suppose. Rosie, did you kind of find that growing up you did kind of muck in from an early age, and that's helped you as you could have grow up in life?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that there's always a job. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of up early, and especially this kind of harvest in the summer. I mean, we were finishing at 2:00 in the morning, and then you don't get a lion. Your day still starts at, you've got to be back on the farm at 7:00 in the morning, whatever happens that night before. And I think we're lucky that being from a farming family, everybody has that ethic, and I think that's probably really helped us to get to where we are now. Is we don't think, it's 5:00, we better clock off now. You kind of, if there's work to be done, whatever hour of the day, it needs to be done.
But neither of you kind of stayed on the farm, as we obviously know now, but you both went off to university, separate universities, I think, if I'm right in saying. Alice, where did you go to uni, and what did you study, and why did you decide to go to uni and not just start on your own?
So I went off to Oxford Brookes University. I'd actually had a couple of years out. Wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do in life. And I had a few jobs. Actually worked in the travel industry, even selling holidays at one point. I was sort of 18, fresh out of college, and thought I wanted to go straight into the working world. But actually, from working with people at that age who were married, had children, that was their job for life. I thought, this isn't me. I'm not ready to settle down in that proper working world yet. So did a bit of travelling, headed off to Oxford Brookes. To be honest, it was more of a lifestyle, getting away from home. It was the first time I'd properly sort of lived away from home. So I saw it as more of a life experience rather than necessarily the academic side of it. I didn't get good grades in A levels, and I managed to get in. I had to go for an interview and basically talk my way into the uni. I think my A levels even spelt dude, not something to be proud of, but yeah. Headed off to Brookes, had the best time, made real friends for life. I did actually study retail management, so there was always something in me potentially that probably didn't even know it then that wanted to go into that sort of world, but it was a mixture of sort of business management, everything from store design. All the modules we did were really interesting, and yeah, it was. I really, really enjoyed my time there. I can't believe it's been years since we left. That's quite a scary thought, actually.
Because Rosie, you went to, am I right in saying, Newcastle University? Is that right?
Yeah.
And you didn't go to the same place. You didn't study the same thing. You were polar opposites in terms of what you actually studied. Why did you decide to go north whilst Alice went south?
Well, I actually kind of had my sights set on Cirencester.
Classic,
and
the RAU.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously.
RAC back in our day.
RAC back in the day, yeah.
And just to kind of do a business course, we were always sort of knew we kind of wanted to do something for ourselves. So I thought, we need as good a tools as possible. And so Cirencester was kind of, that's where I was headed. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to look and see, maybe do some sort of accounting financial course, which actually would give me more of a grounding if we did want to run our own business. Accountants are very expensive. So, if I had that background, and I've always been better at numbers than words anyway. I actually looked, basically Googled the top accountancy courses in the country. Newcastle was one of them. I'd been up to stay with a friend, and the drinks were super cheap,
really cheap,
and it was quite good fun. I think it was 3 trebles for a £5.
Trebles? They don't do that anymore, do they? Trebles are illegal, I think.
I was probably illegal. Probably illegal.
Yeah. Just too much alcohol.
So miraculously I got the grades and got in, and I always thought, you know what, if I really don't like it, I'm sure Cirencester would probably take me. But luckily, I literally, from the first day, I never looked back. Yeah. I loved it.
But neither of you kind of went into running your own business straight after uni. You both kind of went corporate in terms of moving to London and working in London. But Rosie, what did you kind of think you'd do when you left uni? Was it go in and do accountancy for a large corporate business, or did you want to go and work for a startup?
I think my initial thoughts were get on an accountancy grad scheme, get my accountancy qualifications, and then I can then go off and kind of do whatever I like. And that was sort of the penciled plan all the way through. But we had a bit of a financial crisis the year I graduated. Right. So anybody that kind of would have gone into banking couldn't. So the accountancy grad jobs were just ridiculous. There was so many people going for each job. So that kind of scuppered my plan. And actually through a friend of a friend, I got into insurance, which I never knew this world existed in the city. So it was all just through total chance, but it was bloodstock insurance. So and being from a kind of horsey racing background, actually I thought to have that in London, combining everything would just be a great place to start leaving uni, really.
So I'm assuming you graduated in 2008 because of the financial crisis. Was that the period that you graduated? or you were looking
I was
to
going
go
to say
into
8 or 9.
8 or
I'm
9?
hoping it was 9 actually, but it probably was 8.
Hoping it was 9. And Alice, you went and worked for Savills, didn't you? If I'm right in saying, which is
Yes,
again a bit
I
different.
did. I was there for probably about four or 5 years, and I worked within a rural marketing team in the head office in in Oxford Street, and it was brilliant. I was sort of involved in a lot of the trade shows, from cereals to the game fairs, running the stands at those. So actually, that gave me an amazing grounding for what we then went on to do with Hicks and Brown. And again, being farmers' daughters, it was very much in the industry that, in the area, I suppose, rural marketing, that I found of interest at the time. But I guess after 4 years, we just get to a point where you're very constrained by working hours, holiday time, working in the corporate where there's not as much flexibility. And I think that's what's just started to weigh on me, really. We've always wanted to set up something of our own. And I think that was, after about 4 years, got to the point where, we want something of our own now.
London was enough. And if I'm right in saying, you guys sort of set it up fairly accidentally, because you went to a party, and I think you had some dresses that were made by your mother, and people complimented you essentially, and you thought maybe there's a business here somewhere. And again, it kind of grew from there. Rosie, do you want to tell me about how you sort of went into the world of jackets and then hats?
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite a journey to end up with hats where we are now. But yeah, it was actually a wedding, and I kind of Mum had made this jacket for me, and there were so many people at the wedding. They're like, "Oh, Rosie, I love your jacket," and I think at the time, we kind of knew we wanted to do something for ourselves, and we just weren't quite sure where to go, and so we thought, right, let's get some of these made. So it literally started from there. So suddenly every spare second of our time, of our weekends, we were in our mum's workroom. Luckily she's got a great sewing room at home.
Very nice.
And so we just spent the time, making things, and then literally took them to a local point to point. And that's kind of where the journey started, really.
There's no better way to start a business than going to a point to point. We had the guys from Beaufort and Blake on, and I think they
with a little trestle table in a little marquee,
It might have been a different year, but it was the same point to point.
Was it really that Ed went to?
Yeah.
That's a small world. And looking at kind of how you got into the world of hats, because again, to name drop, we had Felix from Fairfax on. Everybody knows Fairfax these days. They seem to be shooing the world. But in terms of how they started, they were doing gun slips essentially, and then they realised that once you buy a gun slip, you kind of don't need to buy another gun slip unless you buy another gun. And then they went into shoes, and you guys, did jackets, went to an event, didn't sell all the jackets, but brought some hats along and sold all the hats. So is that kind of the point that you realised, actually, let's sack the jackets off and go into the world of hats?
You'd think that, but it actually probably took us about a year.
Okay.
To actually realise, didn't it?
We went to this point to point, and we thought it didn't cross our mind that we'd sold out of the hats. We were just really sad that we hadn't sold the jacket. And I reckon it was maybe not quite a year, but it took us a while, and suddenly
We had this light bulb moment, didn't we?
We thought, you know what, if we're always selling out of hats, they're obviously, there's a gap in the market there. This is where we need to go. So it wasn't quite as instantaneous as you would like to think, but no, it was.
And it was amazing actually how that gave us much more of a focus. When you're sort of trying to sell lots of different products, you're fumbling away, you're not really quite sure which direction you're going. And as soon as you whittle it down to your core products, suddenly we were like, right, we know where we are now. And we felt that's where we sort of, we were off from there, really. But yeah, we did take a year, didn't we, Rosie, of just, it was staring us in the face, really. But
getting it off the ground, Alice, must have been quite tricky to a certain extent, because it's all about the time. You guys were basically making these garments yourself, right? And actually, when you were going to the event, you were there in person yourself, and you were trying to sell them, etc., etc., etc. So it must have been quite time-consuming. How did you make the hats? Because I get how you might make a jacket, but I don't get how you make a hat.
So we aren't actually milliners, so we don't actually make the hat, but we do all the trimmings, hand finish. all the hats. So yeah, we used to buy them from a wholesaler, the hats, and then completely trim them up, decorate them, hand finish them ourselves. And we used to source all the feathers locally.
Yeah.
It's just trying to think where I'm going with this, but
No, go on.
Each one, like every single hat we had, so we just bought them from wholesale. They were completely blank.
Yeah.
And then we basically, every hat was different because we just wanted to give people so much choice. I think because we'd narrowed it down to hats, we thought, well, we now need to be as broad as we can with hats. I mean, we had some of them were like purple feathers, yellow feathers, orange, and also it was quite fun because we could kind of give people, someone come to us and they'd be like, oh, I've got this tweed coat, but it's got a bit of orange in it. Can you put that, so we could really do them bespoke and kind of give people what they wanted. But even that, I mean, takes so long. I mean, who knew how many different shades of orange there were that matched with someone's tweed coat, You just don't, you think, oh, an orange feather. But so it even that was so time consuming.
And looking back, actually, offering people too much choice is never a good thing. We'd have so many hats on display at, I don't know, a trade stand at Burley Horse Trials or something like that. And people would just stand there and they just couldn't choose because they thought, oh, well, that's got such a slight variation of colour, or that's a little bit different to that. So it actually wasn't the best route to go down, but you learn from these things. Then you just start need to refining the collection down to what really works, rather than giving people hundreds of choice. Or then people would still say, oh, well, do you have one then that's in a violet colour? Or you've offered some choice, and then they just think, right, well, I can have whatever I want and try and get something really bespokely made, which just it's not a good use of time. It's not scalable anyway, that way for sure.
You need to rein them back in. But in terms of kind of how you launched the business, because it doesn't seem like you did a huge amount of market research. You kind of just, wore something to a wedding, went, I could probably sell it, and kind of cracked on from there. And that kind of worked. But it must have been quite expensive to start with, to buy the materials or the garments or even the hats wholesale and market it and sell it and pay for the stands at the events. How did you fund that initially?
I think we were lucky, and I think that's almost what drove us to London to start with, is we thought, we didn't, coming back to the whole independence thing, we didn't want to be dependent on anybody else. So we thought, right, we need to make some good cash. So we've got something behind us. So Alice even starting working in the restaurants and me on the farm. I mean, in the farm in the summer, you could earn a fortune, and then, and then going to London, obviously, we just managed to get a bit of cash behind us. So it's quite scary when, I suppose it's probably less scary putting our own cash in than from somebody else. But I think that's why we did it quite slowly, because we physically didn't have, we didn't have a big backing behind us.
And quite often then it would be a slightly sort of, I don't know if hand to mouth is the right term, but when we'd sell something at a show, and then our takings from that would then pay for the next show, or it would pay for the next lot of stock. So it was very much, actually, the sales were then paying, everything was going back into the business. At that time, we didn't draw a salary for years. So it was very much, the business was almost sort of paying for itself. But, at the time we didn't have any, hadn't employed anyone else. We weren't paying rent. We were working out of, from the kitchen table, or even then we moved to the garage on the farm. So we didn't have high overheads in that sense at all. We started with just little risk, really. If the worst case, we'd be left with probably about 50 hats to sell, and that was it. So we weren't paying for storage. I wouldn't say it was huge risk at the start, but you're right. There was no business plan, no market research done. So I'm surprised we made it out the door, to be honest.
But that's because Rosie had an accountancy degree, so she knew how to
there you go.
That's exactly why. And Alice, you did a bit of marketing, so you knew how to market it. So when you actually look at it, there was quite good synergy there. But how did you delegate roles out, I suppose, Rosie? How did you make sure that Alice was doing what her strengths sort of aligned with, and Rosie, you did what you could do?
I don't think we really delegated. I think we thought, right, we need to do this. And I would say, I don't know how to do it. And luckily, Alice would say, I know how to do it. So she'd go and do it. And vice versa. And I think, anything to do with a spreadsheet, and I think Alice will agree, is not something she's that happy with doing. But then anything with social media or marketing is something I'm completely not happy doing. So we just kind of fell into it. And I think that's why we work so well together, is although we're sisters, we are completely different. But I think that's why it works, because we have such opposite strengths and weaknesses that actually we've got
a lot of trust, haven't we, as well, in each other. I just know that if it's something to do with figures, forecasting, anything, I'm just like, off you go, Resi, and then likewise with me. And we, of course, we come together to discuss lots of things, but generally there's never been something, has it ever, Resi, when I'm thinking, oh, what's she done there? Or I'm not sure I agree with that. It's just totally your area. So, it just works. We're very lucky in that sense, for sure.
Do you ever kind of sit down and disagree, irrespective of kind of, if it's specific to your sector or your role, be it marketing or otherwise, but do you sit down and go, no, I want this hat to look like this, I want this to look like that? Or is it quite an easy journey? Because there must be some turbulence.
If I'm honest, I really don't think there is. I think also we're although our strengths are so different, yes, we're totally on the same page with where we want to go, our kind of ethos behind the brand, that sort of thing. So I think really we I couldn't tell you the last thing we
I can't at all. And we always say it's, quite often we peak and trough at different times. So, if one of us is sort of having a day, we're thinking, oh, this is not going right. Or the other one is generally having a slightly better day, or can be like, come on, it's not that bad. We'll sort this tomorrow. We'll get through it. So we're very lucky in that sense to have each other. And there's so many things we've turned up to, I don't know, events or something we've been pushed out of our comfort zone, and we thought, thank goodness we've got each other, because it does make it a heck of a lot easier, doesn't it, Rosie?
And in terms of having each other and things that have knocked you back, so to speak, be that events or frankly just buying stock that might have been incorrect, have you got any examples of when things did go quite wrong and actually you thought maybe this is not necessarily it, but something needs to be done to rectify this pretty promptly?
There's probably lots of examples, but one of them, I suppose, was when COVID hit. We a lot of our business is in the shows, also within our independent stockists around the UK. And when lockdown hit, all the shops were shut because they're non-essential shops. The shows were all cancelled, and they're sort of two big parts of our business. And we thought, oh crikey, how's this going to go down? We'd just moved into a massive warehouse on the farm. We'd taken on a new team member. We'd also upped our stock levels, our stock order from the manufacturer, thinking because of COVID, the factory might have to shut down. Suddenly we're left with excess, all this stock. And 2/3 of our business sort of closed down. But actually, the website, thank goodness, just completely kicked off and was our saving grace, really. We sort of thought, who's going to buy a hat? There's no events going on. Yeah. There's no, where are they going to wear them to? But actually, people were even wearing them in the garden. They were wearing, who knows, but we couldn't complain.
Because a lot of businesses that were e-commerce or set up for e-commerce did do quite well for that very reason. I know the guys at Fairfax said the same thing, that they kind of shut down because there was no events, and then bang, there was a huge uplift, and they gave a lot of money to the NHS as well. Now, in terms of kind of pivoting, I suppose, do you now focus more online than you did offline simply because that's the way the world's gone?
I think we were really surprised, kind of the uplift of our B2C online business, but we really missed going to the shows. Yes. And I think the shows are really important. I think, we don't have a shop ourselves, so we never actually physically see our customers. And the shows is the one place where we can be and you can speak to people. And there's positives and negatives of that, but the big thing Alice and I always take away from a show is you see someone come past and you see them nudge their friend and they're like, oh my gosh, it's Hicks and Brown. Yes. And you see them like rush in and the excitement. And, by selling something online, you can look at figures and sales and, you think this is all great. But actually to see that physical reaction from them is, means so much to us. So I think we're really looking forward to getting back to the shows. And I think especially with hats, you do need to try them on. And we have a lot of people that say, oh, no, I'm totally not a hat person.
Yeah.
And then they they put it on, if they see it online, they just think, nah, it's not for me. But you see them put it on, and even their face lights up, and they're like, oh, actually. So it's something that, although our online, has got a lot stronger through COVID, shows are definitely something that, we want to continue for the foreseeable anyway.
And in terms of shows, it's airing the day that this airs, simply as put, is the race day, race week, Wednesday. Unsure what date specifically, but what stand would you guys be at if you were indeed exhibiting at Cheltenham Races?
Yes, so we'll be in the shopping village all week throughout the festival. We are stand 53.
Stand 53, there you go. Going back to how you funded the journey, guys, because I'm really interested in how you actually built the business, how you reinvested, compound investing, if that was indeed what you guys did. Or did you ask family and friends for money to take it to the next level? Was there any point in your journey that you had to get outside funding?
I think to start with, we did it all ourselves, and we kept, putting the cash in, getting it out. And actually we did get a small loan from a family member. I think it was probably our first big stock order, which is always quite scary. But no, we've always been, and it was one of those things that we kind of needed. We really wanted to make sure we could pay it back very quickly. We wrote up all I think we just actually downloaded some wording off the internet, but at least everyone signed it, so we all felt a bit happier that it was kind of legit. But we've always been we just didn't want to borrow anything off anybody if we could really help it. I mean, we've basically self-funded it from the start. And I think really it's I think we never took a salary early on, and I think that probably really helped. So anything that came in stayed in the business, and we just reinvested from there, really.
So that
we did have a lot of support, though, not financially, but we had such a big support network of our family and friends around us, from everything from lending us vehicles to go to shows, to physically helping us pack the stock, to model for us. I mean, you name it. We've really pulled in, every sort of favour possible from our network, really, haven't we, Rosie? Even borrowing Dad's vehicle to tow a trailer during peak of harvest.
To the game fair in the middle of harvest. Oh, Dad, can we just borrow your Discovery, please, to tow our trailer? And he's like, yeah, okay. So he's got whatever little car we had at the time. He's driving around the farm in the middle of harvest with a little Golf, because we've cruised off in his Discovery to take it to a show.
Of course it would be a Golf, it would be nothing else, right? In terms of that kind of a little bit of money that your family, that your friends gave you, and that you had to sort of sign a piece of paper downloaded from the internet to get, what was the value of that? Did you have equity that you gave away, or was it simply, a repayment of loan over time?
It was I think we were so protective of Hicks and Brown. We didn't want to give anything away.
Yeah.
So we literally, it was just a loan, and I believe
as soon as we had money in the bank, it was paid back, wasn't it?
Yes, I believe we wrote interest on it, but I don't believe we actually paid the interest. I think we just paid the figure back. So, but we did pay the amount, just not with any interest.
Makes sense. Well, that's. I mean, that was your first bulk order, you saying, in terms of the first big bulk order that you guys had. What was the quantity of units that you ordered?
Oh, it probably
3,000.
Wow.
3,000 hats.
I think it probably was. I think it probably was about 3,000. But we kind of ordered this, and it was all great. But we slightly didn't really think where we put these hats when they arrive. So hats actually, when they're in a box, take up quite a lot of room if they're in an individual box.
Yeah.
And at the time we were literally in the garage at the end of my garden. So we suddenly had a slight issue of storage. Obviously lucky that we live on a farm, so there's plenty of barns, but barns aren't really the best place. They're a bit dirty, they're a bit dusty. So we actually bought a couple of shipping containers, which I managed to persuade my husband to let me park up in the yard, and he didn't charge us rent for the space, so that was lucky.
That was nice.
So we literally shoved these hats in the container. You know, we didn't think anything of them getting cold, damp, I mean, we were so lucky.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if that container had a leak and they'd all gone mouldy, I mean, who knows where we would be now. So we used to, in the winter, we'd trudge across the farmyard in the mud with a wheelbarrow, and we'd literally be putting these boxes in, and we'd get them back. And then, I mean, so our quality control has always had to be so good, because we think, you know, this box could have been, we just had to be so careful that it hasn't got like a little spider crawling up it or something like. Obviously, in the old days, luckily things have changed a bit since then. But yeah, I think with the big order, that was the, and also we used to take everything to the post office. So the back seats in our cars used to be permanently down, and we'd just pile them in. And the poor people at our little local country post office, I used to turn up in the afternoon, do like 5 trips from the car, pile up, you know, you can't see the post lady because you just high with boxes. Yes, but again, luckily things have changed. We now have couriers that come and collect, so we don't have to worry about.
Almost like we're in the modern world now. You've got people that actually turn up and pick it up rather than having to get a postman Pat to sort it out. And maybe this is a question for you, Alice, but over the last couple of years, you guys have received quite a lot of press and been featured on, you know, reality TV programmes like Made in Chelsea. You've been in Tatley, you've been in Horse and Hound, you've been in The Telegraph, and, you know, you guys have done quite well from a publication standpoint. How have you generated so much press? And we'll probably get on to the obvious answer shortly, but in the sort of early days, how did you get PR and notoriety?
Well, actually, in the early days, we because it was just Rosie and myself, and we knew we weren't skilled in everything we did, so we actually outsourced that part of the business to a PR agency, and from then they got us in national press. You know, we were probably only going for about a year in, and they were getting us in, likes of the Telegraph, in all sorts of big well-known magazines, and I think that helped massively, rather than just focusing on the local papers. And then loads of opportunities came off the back of that as well, because of course people see your name and they start taking you more seriously. So
I think even our friends and family, I feel we had something in the Country Life just before Burley one year, and I think suddenly sort of friends and family had, Alice and Rosie, they've got this little company that they sell a few hats, and then they see us in national press and they're like, oh my gosh. You know, and it's suddenly, you know, even friends and family that knew exactly what we were doing, I think that really helped, didn't it? Yeah. Suddenly getting
take it a bit more seriously.
Press. Yeah.
Mm. And in terms of kind of, you know, when you did start up, I suppose, did you have to beg, borrow and steal and just focus on the local press, or did you spin stories and sort of inflate numbers and tell a few porkies to try and get into those nationals?
No, definitely not. It was all just on the product, really. I think at the time, there weren't many people selling hats or customizing in the way that we do. They were either the really sort of bespoke high-end companies that if you're going to, I don't know, Ascot Racecourse, you wanted something really flamboyant. Of course, there was lots of those milliners about. And there was then the people selling a sort of a 10 quid hat at your local county show just because you've got a bit wet and you want something to keep the rain off. But there was nowhere at the time right in the middle there of really good quality hats as well that are generally made to last, and the style of them as well, very classic and timeless. So it's not fast fashion. They're not going to be out of fashion next week, next year. And generally, even if you only wore it once in the year, it's good to go the next year. So no, we definitely didn't put a spin on things. I think it just came from doing something at the time which felt a little bit different. I mean, sadly now there's lots of copycats and it's a lot of people selling a hat with a feather in it. But that, to be honest, that just spurs us on more to create new product ranges and just think outside the box a little bit as well.
100%. And I like to think that we're an early adopter, because I bought my girlfriend one for her birthday. It's got to be 3 or 4 years ago now. And when was it? 2020 that Kate Middleton, Duchess of Cambridge, decided to don one of your hats, and it was all over the front cover of most newspapers essentially while she was at Sandringham. I'm sure that changed quite a lot of stuff for you guys.
Yeah, it really did. And that day we actually won't ever forget.
No.
I think we were at our stepfather's 70th birthday or something. And it just flashed up on one of our phones. We got tagged in Instagram by some Russian fan following account, royal fan account. And I thought, hang on a minute, what's this? And then, just that moment we saw it, I won't ever forget that, to see her wearing it outside Sandringham. And it just from that moment went absolutely crazy. The orders were just pinging in. I mean, we sold out of that hat pretty much straight away. Really? We had phone calls from people all around the world. People expecting, just because she's worn one of your hats, that you're this global company that has, do you not have a distribution centre in Italy or Milan? Where's your hotline that I could call in Canada? And you're thinking, hang on, if only they knew we're just this small, sister duo that are based on a farm in rural Suffolk. And you suddenly think, crikey, we've really got to up our game here. So we hadn't even got international couriers set up. We had, we were based in a little, at that point we'd moved out of the garage. We'd moved into a little bungalow on the farm, which had been kitted out to be a bit like our office. And we were tripping over ourselves with boxes. It was a crazy time, but just something, it was mega. And at the time we were predominantly focused towards the country lifestyle sector within the UK, and almost overnight that changed, and now really 30% of our target market are from the US. Of our customers are from the US.
And we had US press contact us. We did an interview with the US press, and suddenly we were just thrown in. And then I think Alice and I were talking earlier, we were interviewing for another member of staff. So Alice and I were kind of in a coffee shop down the road because it was carnage in the office. And then one of the girls from the office rings us and says, the kind of local news channel, TV channel wants to come and do a feature on you. He wants to come this afternoon. So Alice and I were like mid-interviews in this coffee shop. Luckily, we'd finished them. We rushed back to the bungalow, which you can't see anybody because there's just cardboard boxes everywhere. And I kind of think
customer facing, is it?
No, and I think this news reporter was slightly expecting us to be a little more organised, maybe.
I remember his comment when he walked in. Oh right, okay. Well, I'm sure we can make it work. Because it was we were being filmed, weren't we? It wasn't just a radio interview. Oh dear.
So the girls had to vacate the office, and I think we just shut them in the kitchen, didn't we? So they were kind of out the way. There wasn't a lot of space back then to. But yeah, it was quite a whirlwind, really, wasn't it?
And what's quite amazing, people talk about the Kate effect, and we just thought, really, until you actually experience it, it's pretty phenomenal, really. That people, especially the Americans, they just love the Royals, and they've got to have that hat. So when we sold out, we managed to speak to our factory immediately and got more on, so we could take pre-orders, which was vital, because otherwise we would have lost a lot of sales through that. But people didn't care how long they had to wait. It was going to be a few months till they got the hat, but they were very happy to wait. And even then, when it came back in stock, people that hadn't even pre-ordered were just buying it, and it still is nearly one of our best sellers to date. And that happened over 2 years ago.
Well, I suppose it's because you guys rank so well now. If you type in Hicks and Brown online, then bang, you have a photo of Kate wearing this beautiful blue hat, I suppose. And in terms of what the Kate effect kind of meant to your brand, Hicks and Brown, how much did you actually make from literally Kate wearing your hat?
Oh, quite hard to pinpoint. I mean, we probably took, I can't remember what the stat was, Rosie. It was something like we took our year's takings from the previous year within that couple of weeks. Wow. It was mental. It really was. It was quite staggering, actually.
And have things sort of continued with that uplift, I suppose? So have you just consistently grown ever since that point, or has there been an element where it's sort of levelled off and yes, that might be a good seller, but actually it's sort of at an expected level now?
I think we've always, every year since we've started, we've always grown. And I think obviously 2020, that January was massive. Yeah. And as Alice said, we kind of reached our targets by the second week in January for the year. But then, we had that concern. We think, this is great, but next year we're not going to have the Kate effect. So then what's that going to do? But actually, I think by having that, as Alice said, it's kind of thrown us this whole new market of people now know about us. And, the Americans especially, I think every time we have a new catalogue, a new products, they're quite loyal followers, aren't they?
Yeah, they're bought into the brand now. And I remember that Christmas. So that happened in Kate wore the hat in January. And then the Christmas later that year in December was amazing for us. And I think that's, people who had bought the hat would then, it really spread the word. They were buying for their friends, for their family, these new customers of ours. It was amazing. But yes, you certainly can't rely on those special events, as we call it. But obviously they're amazing when it happens, and you can't plan for them either. So
no, you can't. And
who knows? Around the corner.
I think packing tape and boxes. We almost got to a point where we've now got the hats, but we can't send them out because we have no boxes. So there was
always something,
things, and that you don't really kind of think about at the time. But no, it was. Yeah,
it was amazing. Obviously, it's helped you guys hugely in that sense. But you've also diversified slightly in recent years. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but you've now got obviously a gentleman's or a menswear section, which I don't think you used to have from memory. But arguably, you also do clutch bags, which is that a new addition as well?
Bags, actually, we've been doing for quite a while. And we used to do really sort of vibrant colours with using cowhides and sort of bright colour suedes. But actually, when we started to focus on the hats, we realised they just seemed like a bit of an odd product, although people bought them and always told us how much they loved them. But when you lined the collection up, it just looked a bit unusual. You've got these lovely timeless hats in quite muted colours, and then you've got these sort of quite vivid, vibrant cowhides with pink leathers and everything. It didn't sit well, and we thought we've just got to find when we were trying to find our focus, that actually we stopped doing those. So we did pick up then the clutch bags using the velvets and similar tones, but that's becoming less of a focus for us. It's really the headwear we're looking to develop even further. And yes, you're right. We've just started with the Baker Boys for men, and then we're going to look on to develop sort of further for the men. That's definitely an area that we're focusing on this year for sure.
Yeah, because when I jumped on the website, I had no idea you guys did stuff for men, so I'm going to have to jump on getting a trilby or something like that. But Peaky Blinders and the new Baker Boys hats that you guys have got, was it inspired by Peaky Blinders? Has that helped in any way?
I wouldn't say it is. No, it's actually flat caps have always been something that's the country set have always worn, but there's something about the Baker Boy that's just that little bit more. It's got a bit more of a fashion edge to it rather than your real sort of old farmer boy wearing one. And it's not reinventing the wheel by no means, but it's putting our own spin on it. And we find a lot of customers now want that kind of hat, but they want to buy it from us. They don't want to just buy it from someone else. So, and we're going to be, a lot of our products again, they're nothing new that people have never seen before, but it's putting our own spin on it and making sure it's made to the most highest quality that really is going to last, and it's not just about the look.
So as you bring on new product ranges, or indeed new SKUs, I suppose, are you having to grow the team? Are you having to invest more cash? Are you guys quite happy with how the business is going at the moment, and you stepping back slightly? What does it look like structurally? Rosie, you're obviously pregnant, so congratulations.
Thanks. With number 2, so Alice already has 2.
Easy then.
So we're just adding to the brood, but I think
the juggle gets even bigger. Yeah.
I know. Life is a constant juggle. But I think we have just taken on. We took on another part-time member of staff last summer, who is now with us full-time. But it's really tricky because we've actually physically can't work 24 hours a day every day, which we used to try. So obviously, with a young family, it's not quite as easy, to be everywhere in one go. But we've got a really brilliant team, and they all started with us in part-time roles because I think we were a bit worried about, I don't know, we never really kind of said, I think we didn't want to let go, but we knew we needed some help. But all of those part-times are now all full-time. And our first ever employee is very much with us, and she's taken on, all of them have taken on so much more since we've had to kind of step back a little bit. But it's good, it's growing, and yeah, I think I think we're managing where we are at the moment, but
then that's the joy, isn't it, of working? That's the joy of working for yourself. Rosie and I can make up hours, in the evening, at weekends if we have to.
Yes.
Whereas, and we've got the passion, so we want to do it, and we want to know where we are at with certain projects. But yeah, Rosie said, we've got such a great team who we fully trust, and just. They're amazing. They're a proper sort of Hicks Brown family, I'd say, aren't they? They sort of live and breathe it as much as we do, which is amazing to find that in people.
And in terms of sacrifices that one has to make when they're starting a business, growing a business, running a business, Rosie, you say you can't work 24 hours a day like you used to, but what other sacrifices do you guys have to make just to keep the business kind of going?
I think in the early days we made a lot of sacrifices. I think Alice was talking when Alice was in her full-time job in London. Taking your annual leave to go to a show with Hicks and Brown. And then Al, you'll probably
and then I used to get back from the show absolutely exhausted. I might have got back sort of midnight, unloaded the lorry, and then got myself back up to London, get back into my desk the next morning in my sort of corporate role, and lovely break. You're like, yeah, if only you knew. Oh God, absolutely on my knees, just exhausted. But yeah, so they were certainly sacrifices. You're using all your holiday time to focus on the business and be at the shows. I mean, I'm lucky. My husband, he's also got his own business, so fully understands that we work in the evening. It's quite sad, really, to be honest. Both sat with our laptops sometimes when the kids are in bed. But it's what makes us tick. And I think just having your own business, it's your passion. It's your other baby.
I almost don't think of it as a sort of sacrifice. You just think, well, we've got to do it. So you just, you kind of have to make it work.
We never took maternity leaves, either of us. I mean, obviously you have to slightly take a back seat when you're week one of having a newborn. But still, whether it's on WhatsApp, email, just like wanting to know what's going on. I mean, we've been on many Zoom calls with newborn babies sort of over our shoulder or in our arms, or having to tilt the camera up so you can't quite see a screaming baby, put it on mute. It's the things we've had to do. But yeah, I suppose you're right, Rosie. It's not really sacrifices. It's just so ingrained in us that you want something to work. You're pushing it every year, wanting to grow. We're so motivated that it's that's what just drives you, really. You don't. Yeah, it's just part of our life, really, isn't it?
And it's
working whenever we can.
You guys have really hustled and grafted quite a lot to get it to where it is today. Alice, obviously working 2 jobs. Rosie, obviously, sort of working as much as you possibly could around the clock. In terms of kind of how important upbringing was in terms of, I don't want to use the term necessarily privilege, but having the access to, farm kit, farm machinery, farm space, storage, access to cash if needed. Again, Alice, your husband at the moment, runs a business, so he gets it. How important has that been to the growth of Hicks and Brown? Because people who've got nothing maybe couldn't have done it.
I think we have been really lucky to have the resources we've had, and I guess that's probably why we haven't had to kind of go elsewhere to get some funds and that sort of thing. And I think we were really lucky with the kind of risk aspect. We kind of every premises we've had has been on the farm. I mean, don't get me wrong, we have always paid our rent and that sort of thing. We also don't like to take too many favours. But yeah, at the same time, we have been really lucky, and kind of when I left London, I didn't have to pay any rent, so I didn't. It's those kind of things. I feel if I wouldn't have been able to throw myself in full time with Hicks and Brown as early as I did, if I needed some funds. And actually, my husband, as well as a farmer, trains point-to-point horses.
Right.
So when I first came back, I would kind of ride 3 lots in the morning before then going to Hicks Brown. So at least I'd have a bit of cash, to keep me going. And actually, we were talking about it the other day. We had so Hicks and Brown had kind of started was growing quite well, in the early days, and we'd got a few stockists, quite big names that we were quite proud of. But the phone was diverted to my mobile if I wasn't in the office. And, if I'm riding, I was obviously doing this riding to work, to get some cash, that sort of thing. But I thought, if they ring me and they think, God, what's she doing? She's just off pottering on a horse, going for a jolly around the countryside. So actually, Alice is really good at finding, and I don't know how to describe it, but we basically found this company called Moneypenny.
I know Moneypenny, yeah.
Yeah,
And they're an answering service, aren't they?
Yeah.
So someone would ring the office, it would go through to Moneypenny, and if it was someone important and I was on a horse, I'd say, I'll give them a call back. But then, if it was somebody like, I don't know, a supplier or something that we were waiting for some news on, then obviously I could kind of talk to them and that sort of thing. So so that was quite a good filter to allow
it does make it more human, though, doesn't it? We are a family business, and at the end of the day, if they heard the horses clip-clopping in the background, it's I suppose not trying to hide too much, but yeah, it's funny how you try and put on this real professional image with having this answering service, and then little do they know how we're trying to juggle it.
I remember exactly that in the early days when we started up, and we had one landline, one phone in the office, and it was just me. And I used to put other people's names on the bottom of signatures to make it feel like a bigger business. And people used to call up and go, "Hi, is Stacey there?" And I'd go, "No, she's not actually. I'll call you back, or someone will call you back, or whatever." And it's just these interesting personas or interesting ways of dealing with, I suppose, people understanding or wanting to understand that you're bigger than you actually are, to try and get that deal. Everyone knows that people fake it until they make it. But it's interesting how you didn't want to hear the horse's hooves in the background, because I think that adds authenticity. It adds an element of realism to the brand and makes it, as you rightly say, Alice, a sort of family-orientated business. But going back, I suppose, to that family aspect, do you think you could ever sell the business?
Oh, it's something we do toy with the idea a bit, but it's become so much part of our life. It's a lifestyle thing, isn't it, Rosie, with Hicks and Brown, that I don't know what we'd do without. We've built it from literally nothing to where we are today. That, I mean, who knows? When our children are grown up, is it something we get to a point where we think this is not for us anymore? But it's really tricky to.
We feel we've got so much more to give, and we've got so much potential that, especially kind of last year, the year before, and a couple of years, with a real young family, I think, we're not going to try and reach our full potential in the next couple of years, because we know it's just not. It's not possible. We're always trying to push forward. But I think, I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where we feel we can't grow anymore. And I think when you run your own business, there's always things you can do better. There's always things you want to improve. You're always looking at, anything to kind of make it better. And I feel that I don't know if we'll ever get to that point where we'll be happy and think, right, we've done our job, we've succeeded. I think, I think with the whole success and the journey, I think like our first goal with Hicks and Brown was, right, let's get this company so we can earn a salary out of it and leave our other jobs. And we thought that's when we've made it. We got to that point and we thought, hang on a second, there's, so I think the goalposts are always changing. So at the moment, no, we definitely don't have any plans to.
And I think when I touched on earlier about our audience, 30% is from the US. We're barely doing that. They're just people buying from our website. We've started working with some US buckets, but we feel the potential there. We barely got started on that, so that's quite exciting to look to in the future, because they're just a big market out there who just love hats.
And in terms of,
so I think you're right, Rosie. We'll never feel we're done.
In terms of the US and the growth and the expansion out there, though, what sort of tips and tricks would you say to people that are looking to distribute or grow or explore the US as a market? Because you guys kind of accidentally got into it because of Kate, really.
One of the things, really, we had to make our website much more user friendly for customers in the US. So really? We work with a company called Globally, who convert all our website into local currencies. So from wherever you're visiting from around the world, so they're seeing it in local currency. They can pay in their local currency as well. Also, you get access to incredible shipping rates. So, if we were just tapping into, I don't know, UPS website, the amount we'd be charged to send one shipment to America is astronomical. And we were having to charge that onto the customer at the time. But since moving to work with this third party, we can now, send the hats at a much more reasonable price, because that's quite often the barrier, is the shipping.
Yeah.
And especially for us with the hats, as Rosie said, it's they're very light, but they take up quite a lot of space. So, the shipping price is crazy. We did do a little bit of focusing on Facebook adverts out there. We sort of contacted lots of stockists out there as well. I'd say just it's such a big nut to crack, for sure. So we were just lucky. We just fell into it and are able to grow in we're quite fortunate in that sense.
And one thing I suppose that has helped is the user-generated content, I suppose, area of social media, or UGC, where people do take photos and tag themselves in hats and such like. And today being the 16th, and obviously with Cheltenham in full swing, there's a lot of spotted pages that crop up in the red tops of individual celebrities wearing hats or boots or bags or whatever. Do you guys sit there and eagerly look at who's wearing your hats? Do you know before they put them on, or how does that work for you?
We work with a lot of micro-influencers, so and we've got an incredible sort of group of those we work with who wear our hats, love taking photos and sharing it amongst all their followers, and that's amazing. But the slightly more, I call it, the VIPs, no, you don't always know they're going to wear it, because quite often, sometimes their stylist or someone has bought the hat from you without even making themselves known.
Right.
But of course, we're always checking the old, Daily Mail Online, classic those sort of pages for anything spotted. So we'll be keeping our eye firmly on that.
And in terms of scaling, how important are these events to you guys? Because obviously you've started out in events, you still go to events. At what point will you kind of go, actually, it's okay, we don't need to be at these because we have enough churn and authenticity online?
We had 1 year where we went to loads of shows. You soon start whittling out the ones that do work and don't work. But actually, we've got to a point, we've got about 4-5 core events that just work for us and feel that we need a presence. They cost a fortune to exhibit at. It takes a real hit on the margin, but it's just being seen. And also, as Rosie said, with hats, you do need to try them on. People love to try hats on. They're all sized as well, our hats. So it's a bit like walking to a shoe shop. You do need to try them on. So I think for us, the show business will continue for a good few years. It's been part of us from day one. So
and we love going to the shows, don't we? And I think especially Cheltenham is kind of being from the racing background anyway. We love being there anyway. Although sometimes a day goes by and we haven't even been outside. We've literally head down, and we could literally be anywhere. But it's nice, and I think we love seeing all the customers, and everyone's so like-minded, aren't they? Which is really good.
And you get a lot of our sort of loyal followers, as it were, say, "Oh, are we going to see you at Cheltenham? Or will you be at Badminton Horse Trials?" They want to see us as well, and so it's. I foresee that being a part of our business for many years, really, at the moment.
And in terms of micro-influencers and getting people like that on board to wear your hats, what does that look like in terms of costs to a brand like you, for people that are starting up and wanting to use micro-influencers to market themselves?
So we work with micro-influencers. We don't ever pay a fee to them, because we don't really believe in that. It feels like you're paying someone to talk. It just doesn't feel right to us. Most of the people that we've gifted a hat to have either bought a product from us in the first instance, so they're bought into the brand. They generally love our product, and because they've actually just shouted about it on their social media, we've said, "Hey, hang on a minute, we'd love to send you another product, or this is out new." You clearly we just. To us, it's got to feel genuine. I just can't bear it when you see those ads that say, paid content or ad, or I just think you're just being paid to say it, and it just doesn't feel genuine. So in terms of going to your question about cost, you can start very small, even a couple of products a month, anything, as long as you get that promise that you'll get just a lovely photo in return that you can then share. Of course, it's them shouting about it to their followers, and it can just grow organically like that. But in terms of that versus paying for a full page print ad in a magazine, it's so much cheaper, because you are really just paying for the cost price of the hat. So
100%.
Yeah, it works well.
And in terms then, I suppose this is a kind of question for both of you, maybe starting with you, Rosie. You obviously mentioned that you're wanting to continue to grow, Hicks and Brown, but what does success actually look like to you individually, irrespective of what happens with the business? What does it look like to you?
I kind of feel I touched on it earlier. The success thing, it's constantly changing. And I think, when we first started, we kind of saw success as having this company and taking a salary and actually, being able to live a life doing what we want to do. And then I think once we kind of got to that success, the barrier is always changing, I think. And I don't know, it's a tricky one. I think I don't think we'll ever feel like we've arrived I don't think we'll ever turn around and say, oh my gosh, Alice, we're really successful, we've nailed it. I think there's always, and doing something for yourself, you're always so critical of everything. And I kind of feel, even if now we think, right, in 5 years' time, I think we're going to be super successful. If I don't know, but then I feel we'll get to those 5 years, and we'll think, well, 5 years ago, yes, we thought that was successful, but actually, there's so many more things that we could still do and improve on.
There was a point when I thought, this is really cool, because we'd be at, I don't know, a family or a friend's event, and someone would say, oh, so what is it that you do? So we sell hats, and they say, oh, what's the name? We say Hicks and Brown. They go, oh gosh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
And that to me at the time was like, wow, okay, this is cool. That you're not just mum or dad that have heard of it. This is a friend of a friend that has generally heard of us. So that to me was like, okay, we're getting some traction here. But I guess success from my side, well, probably Rosie's as well, is we've always wanted to be known as like a household brand. So if people want a hat, they know they go to Hicks and Brown. To me, would feel where I'd want to be at.
To be fair, if I wanted a hat, I'd go to Hicks and Brown, and hopefully you get some kind of success, Alice and Rosie, at Cheltenham races this week, with either a horse or people just coming past the stand and buying many, many garments. But in terms of those that want to buy it online that aren't lucky enough to be at Cheltenham today, where can they go to buy your product?
Yeah, so you can buy it at hicksandbrown.com, which is pretty straightforward. And you can also buy a lot of our stockists as well. So simply if you type in Hicks and Brown into Google, we've got some lovely independent stockists all around the country that even if you want to pop into store and try one on, you can buy one from there as well.
You're a staple of the British countryside, and go for it, Rosie. I was going to wrap it up, but go on.
Sorry, I was just going to drop something else in.
No,
so we do them in extra small to extra large, which you'd think kind of 5 sizes for people's heads, would probably cover everything. But we've actually found that, there's a lot of people that are kind of in between. So we also do a resizer, which has made the bit. I mean, when we first started, we used to shove a little bit of foam or people would just make their own, put a bit of kitchen roll or something in the back of a hat. But we thought, actually, come on, we really need to offer this to people. So we also do these little resizes. They're just little foam inserts that you just pop inside the band. So if you're kind of between sizes, we'd normally say maybe just go up a size and then just get some resizes with it, and that will just kind of bring it down and should fit perfectly. So
there you go. I've got a big head. I need to go online and find a hat and buy a resizer, I imagine, because it'll just be a little bit too tight. Right, guys, you're a staple of the British countryside. Best of luck at Cheltenham races. Best of luck with everything Hicks and Brown are doing. Thank you ever so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure to chat.